Hello and welcome to the Embroidered Elephant channel. My name is Kim, I'm the face behind the channel, and you have joined me today for another December video. Today I am going to be talking about some beginner tips for crocheters. I will be looking down a little bit just because I've got some notes, but hopefully you can bear with me. So the first question I get asked a lot, or I'm sure a lot of crocheters get asked, is what is the difference between knitting and crochet? Well, the first difference and the main difference is that knitting uses two needles, so they are pointed on one side. You need two of them, and all of the loops, all of the stitches are kept on both of these. Knitting is usually more floaty, it can be more sort of stretchy. It's not as dense as crochet, and crochet uses just one tool, which is called a hook. This is just one I've got. So usually with crochet you just have a couple of loops on your hook, and you can see that there's no pointy part, it's just the hook. So with normal crochet you tend to only have a couple of loops on the hook at one point, and it's not sharp. The only difference here would be Tunisian crochet, which is sort of a mix between knitting and crochet. You have a longer hook and you keep more loops on there, but that's not what we're talking about today. So when you crochet material, it tends to have more structure, and it makes a thicker and more dense material than knitting does, and it makes the fabric have less of a flow, and it can be stiffer and not as stretchy as knitting. It can be easier to crochet in the flat than it is in knitting though. So what I mean by that is making something flat, 2D, rather than in the round. Research has shown that crochet can be meditative, and it's also a good creative outlet, and there is such a big community of fibre artists, so knitters, crocheters, yarn dyers, and everything in between. So it can build a community for you. It can help you sort of talk to people with similar hobbies. And the crochet and knitting community tends to be very accepting as well. So on to some of the tips and tricks. So the basics. The hook. What hook should you go for when you first start learning to crochet? My advice is the hook doesn't need to be overly expensive, but make it ergonomic if you can. Ergonomic means that it's nicer for your hands, and it can mean that you can crochet for longer without hurting yourself. It can put your hand in a better position than something such as this without sort of a structure. So as I said, it doesn't need to be overly expensive. My advice would also be to start with one hook, just in case the hook style that you buy does not suit you, or you find a style that is better for you. And if you're unsure about what size to start with, I would recommend usually around a 5 or a 6, but depending on the project you are doing, firstly it'll give you recommendations for your hook size. If you're in doubt, always look at the band. So this is the yarn band for the wool that you've bought, and it will always tell you there what size you need to take. So here it says 6. So you'd start with a 6 hook. Next is, of course, the yarn. So again, I would recommend starting with a medium weight yarn, which is depending on the size, so how thick the yarn is. You can get very small, which is lace weight or sock weight yarn. Then you can move on to thicker yarns such as DK, Aran, worsted, etc. And then you can go for the chunky and the super chunky. I would recommend sticking to the medium to heavy weight yarns because it is easier to see the stitches as you do them, and the projects work up much quicker as well. The yarn should be smooth, preferably meaning it doesn't split as you use it, such as this would be a good one to start with. For example, as you crochet, because the yarn is very together, it's less likely to split. This is just West Hampton Valley yarns, rather than something like this, which you can imagine when you crochet it, it's more likely that your hook could go through the yarn and separate it, and it can get a bit confusing. I would say to pay attention to fibre content as well. So different fibres are used for different projects, and that can affect how you care for them. So for example, if you've got the basics cotton, that will be better for projects that could get wet, such as dishcloths, tea towels, etc. Whereas if you are going for something that you are going to wear, it would probably be best to use sort of acrylic, linen, etc. Amigurumi is, you know, it's good with everything, but you might be more likely to use acrylic with amigurumi. Although ultimately it's your decision what you use the yarn for. As said, just make sure that if you're making a pattern with a couple of different yarns, that they've got similar or the same content. So cotton with cotton, acrylic with acrylic, etc. Although tempting, and I made this mistake, don't buy all of the yarn or don't buy too much. As you crochet more, you will get a sense of what your colour preferences are, whether there is a fibre that you like more, i.e. you make more clothes so you want to buy more wool, or whether you want to start smaller projects such as you want to make socks, or you stick with amigurumi and you need specifically finer yarns. What you will find as well is when you first start off, or I know I definitely did, I bought smaller quantities, so I'd buy one skein of this, that and the other, which meant that when it came to making projects, there was less that I could make with them because I had a smaller quantity. So that's just something to be aware of. You will find that even if there is a really, really good sale on, or if the yarn seems to be quite cheap, it will always come around again. They tend to be fairly often, so don't worry too much about missing out. And lastly, about the yarn, I would recommend not starting with dark colours, because it's harder to see if you're using sort of a dark purple or black yarn as opposed to a lighter colour. It can be easy to sort of miss stitches, not be able to see it, and it hurts your eyes as well. So on to the last part is quick tips before you start. So some extras that you might want along with your hook and your yarn is some stitch markers, which can look like these. These are the sort of the basic ones. So they are made of plastic, and they are good if you are going to leave your project or you want to know where your increases are, decreases are, etc. This is a good way of keeping track rather than trying to remember. Scissors as well. So, you know, they can be any scissors, and, you know, they don't need to be special. They can be something as simple as this, just to cut the yarn when you're finished with it. And lastly, I've got this all everywhere, a tapestry needle. So this is just a thicker blunt needle compared to a sewing needle, and this is used to weave in ends, which means when you come to the end of the project and you have what we call a yarn tail, you can put it in so that it looks neat. But again, if you're dipping your toe in and you're not sure what you need, they wouldn't necessarily be essential. It's just very helpful. You could weave in ends with your crochet hook. You wouldn't need a needle, and you know, you can use things around the house to instead of a stitch marker. So when you are choosing the project, make sure that you read the pattern before you start. If you can, try to practice the stitches before you start so that when it comes around to it, you're confident with them. For example, a single crochet, double crochet, increase, decreases, you know, if it's puff, stitch, etc. I'd advise that you start with easy projects to practice key stitches, the main stitches that you will be using when you start, I would suggest, is single crochet, double crochet, a magic ring, and obviously chain stitch. Next we're on to the project. So make sure that you read the pattern before you start. If you can, practice the stitches before you start. This is really good because when it will come up in the pattern, for example, if it's an increase or a decrease, you know exactly what you're doing and you feel confident to do it on your actual piece of crochet. The first pattern to go with, I would suggest something smaller, probably something square or circular, but 2D. This is great because it allows you again to get comfortable with reading the pattern or following instructions. It will show you the key stitches such as single crochet, double crochet, a magic ring, etc. So some of the ones that I would start with would be dishcloths. They are super simple, and although this looks a bit more difficult, potentially because it's got this in the middle, but that's just the yarn, so you've just got something straight. A granny square, which again is key in a lot of different designs. It's quite big at the moment, has been for many years. And also doilies. So you can get doilies that are made with very, very fine yarn. I'm talking about the ones that are a bit chunkier. So potentially something like this, but circular. If your pattern asks for a gauge swatch, and most of them do one. Yes, it's annoying. It's basically where the pattern designer asks you to test out the pattern on a little square to make sure that your gauge, so your yarn, your crochet hook, and how thick you crochet, that fits with the design. Now, I would say, as a devil's advocate, this is predominantly necessary for items that you will wear or that you need to be a certain size. For example, hats or jumpers, definitely do one, because you don't want to make one that's 20 times too big or 20 times too small, and then you've put a lot of time and effort into something that doesn't fit. Next, just to throw a little bit of confusion in, understand that there are different terms, so American and British crochet. So in American terms, single and double crochet terms are used. British crochet, it's a double and a treble. So they mean the same thing, it's just slightly different. The pattern or the instructions should make that clear at the start, but it's just something to be aware of because it can impact the look of your design. So one design that I made very early on is this sampler blanket. This is burgundy blush design. I think the pattern asked for double crochet and I did the wrong stitch. So this is meant to be double crochet. I did single, so that's not great. Obviously it means that the blanket is a lot smaller than it should be. It should be double this size, but it's a baby blanket, so you know. Yeah, so there's different terms. As I said beforehand, there is such a big fibre community. You can find them everywhere. So when you're learning to crochet, don't just stick to one resource if that's not working for you. There are tons and tons of YouTube tutorials, real beginner ones explaining the steps, different stitches. There are patterns online as well, on YouTube specifically. You can go to various different blogs. Different yarn companies usually have free patterns or paid for patterns on there. You can go to a local yarn shop. Sometimes they have tutorials on how to crochet. If you're in the UK, I know that Hobbycraft has one, which Hobbycraft is a big chain of craft shops in England, maybe the UK as well, but I'm not entirely sure. So they can help you one-to-one. Speak to family members if they know how to do it as well. I'm sure that they'd be more than happy to pass on their skill. So there are tons of support out there, so find something that works for you. And lastly, practice makes perfect. Don't expect the first thing you make to be perfect, you know, good enough to give as a gift or put on your wall, etc. It will take some time to get used to it. but it is so worth it. The stuff that you can make is incredible, and as I said, it's very good for your mental health, and it's just great. And come over to the dark side of buying all of the yarn once you're happy, you know what you like, and all of the crochet hooks, etc. It's great. And if you do need any support, if you do need any help at all, leave a comment below and I will get in touch. I will leave my Instagram, email address, and where you can find me on Etsy as well. So thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully I've given you some advice or even inspired you a little bit to start crochet yourself. Welcome to the team. Yes, if you enjoyed this video, please feel free to subscribe, click the notifications bell, and you will be notified every time I have a new video out. And I will see you tomorrow with another December video. Thank you for your time. Bye.